Hi, everyone. This is Christine Thompson with Baird and Warner, lead agent on the CT team. I appreciate you opening up my show. I do this every week, alternating between attorney, lender. I might start introducing other vendors as well. But today I have Steve Shaykin with me. I've worked with Steve, referring him to my clients for, I don't know how long, Steve. I can't even remember.
Well, it's been a good long time, and it's
It's
been
got
a great opportunity.
it's got to be at least probably 15 years.
It was right around 08, 09 when the only deals we had were short sales, and we got
Yeah,
together because we both learned how to do them and
that's right.
handled a lot of people that had a lot of those issues.
Yeah, I was the short sale queen in my office. They're like, oh, go to Christine. She does the short sales. Anyways, thank you for joining us. Steve Shakin. We're going to give you Steve Shakin's contact information at the end of the show. We want to just jump right into it. So, Steve, you brought up a really good topic. And first of all, I want to say thank you for jumping in while you're sitting at a closing. Always available. You're an
Always a
awesome guy.
pleasure.
I appreciate it. So one of the topics that's a very common topic that comes up after people are under contract for both sides, seller and buyer, is the inspection. And sometimes buyers, agents, or buyers themselves gloss over the details in that paragraph in the contract, which is really, really important to know and should be explained to them when they're signing even an offer. But sometimes there's so much going on in your mind, you don't hear it all from your agent. And then inspection happens. And I've seen buyers asking for things that are not appropriate to the contract. Steve, I'm going to let you kind of expand on that.
Well, as always, thank you again for the opportunity to be on the show, and good morning to everybody that's listening. Um, it's a very interesting dynamic, and like most things contractual, anything can be agreed upon if the parties are willing to. And each market dictates who's got the leverage. And so right now things seem to be more on the seller side of things, but that's not always the case, but it is at the moment. So the point is, the inspection language certainly allows the buyers to inspect the property, and they should feel comfortable with what they're getting. But there's specific language in there that says that only the buyers are only allowed to raise true defects as something that they need to consider with the seller. And there's language that specifies that just because something is older doesn't mean it's defective. If you have an older furnace or an older hot water heater, the inspectors always raise those things. They believe that they're there to look at every detail, and they point things out. Well, the furnace was manufactured 15 years ago, and furnaces don't last forever. So then buyers get nervous. Oh my God, I may need a new furnace. But
Right.
there's nothing wrong with the current furnace. They were purchasing the home based on the fact that the equipment was not brand new, and they're getting exactly what they're paying for. So they have no right to really request anything in relation to that furnace because they didn't find anything wrong with it. They're just being buyers and being nervous, as most buyers are,
Right.
about that. So that's not a legitimate uh, defect to be raised.
Can I ask a question now that you're talking about furnace? I'm going to sidetrack a little bit. Sometimes you get these inspectors and the furnace is all dusty and there's a dirty filter in there and dust, but it's working fine. And the inspector says, wow, this thing's really dirty. It needs to be cleaned. And then buyers go back and ask the seller, we want you to send a professional in there and do a maintenance check and get it cleaned. What's your
Yeah,
stand?
I see that all the time. And again, the negotiations that led up to the contract in the first place, and was it an offer that was competing with four other offers at the time? And if I had that buyer as a client and that were their concern, I would tell them it's not worth it to raise that under these circumstances. You were fortunate enough to be the one that the seller chose. Your offer won out over others. It's routine maintenance. In fact, there's language in the inspection paragraph also that says routine maintenance items are not a part of this inspection contingency, because everything needs to be maintained, and sometimes sellers are a little slow or derelict in maintaining things, which is exactly the situation with the furnace.
Yeah.
So that's not a legitimate concern. And in those circumstances, I would say, let's not do it. Spend the $100 yourself and have your furnace cleaned. Now, in other circumstances, I do tell my client, the seller, it's probably not worth it to fight over this point. Just have somebody come in and clean and service the furnace. That gives the buyer a warm and fuzzy feeling that a professional looked at it and cleaned it up and didn't find any defects. So it works both ways.
Yeah.
But
just depends on the circumstances. Are there 5 buyers lined up behind you?
Exactly.
From what I understand, you said a little bit earlier, you put yourself at risk. You're saying, like, if they go back and ask for this or that, they're putting themselves at risk if the seller can say, nope, we're not doing it. We're going to cancel on you.
Yeah, because one of those other 4 buyers in the meantime may have come back into the picture saying, okay, well, you didn't accept my offer, but what about now? And they do something to make their offer better than it was the first time. And the sellers are like, and then you hate to ask the question. The seller would ask me, well, I'm kind of interested in moving in a different direction. Is there a way to cancel this contract that I'm currently in? And of course, the buyer asking for something that isn't justified in the contract is one of the ways that you can terminate the contract on that buyer. So you do have to be careful what you're doing. And that's why sometimes clients get a little concerned with me that when I bring these points up and discuss these legal issues, that they think I'm not really advocating for them. And it's not that I don't want to do what they want, but I want to make sure they understand the possible ramifications of it and get into what all the circumstances are to give them what I consider to be my best advice in those situations.
Yeah. And, also, if you're talking about $100 or so to get a furnace, somebody to look at a furnace and clean it versus you just spent how much on an inspection and you want to risk canceling that, and that money's gone.
Yeah, when you look at it in terms of the average size of the transaction, you're looking at a $400,000, $500,000, $600,000 deal, and you're worried about $100 bill to the
you're walking away
guy.
And you're walking away from money you already have invested in the transaction. You're paying the lender a little bit of money up front, right? You're paying money for inspection on a radon test. And then if you're finagling over a few $100 of something getting done, and you're opening up that window of risk. And then bye-bye to all that money you already spent on the transaction, just because you're picking over small, what's to be known as, this is home maintenance, home ownership.
And then if the deal ends up being canceled on that buyer, they've got to go do the same thing all over again on another property that in this market is difficult to find.
Yeah, right.
Because when they find the one, and I'm sure you do this as well, but I ask buyers, because the deal comes to me after all this, I'm like, well, why'd you pick this house? I'm sure it wasn't the first one you've seen. And they'll give me all kinds of really good reasons. It's the school district. It's near my family. It's, whatever those,
it's the only one available.
And those are seemingly way more important than minor monetary issues.
Yeah.
Even if there is a defect, you don't have to necessarily stand on your principle. I mean, there are times when you do, and you're in a better negotiating position. So, you take advantage of that. But other times, you don't want to miss out on all the boxes that this particular home has checked for you over a non-specific minor issue. One point I wanted to make, though, is there's one more little trick to the inspection clause that a lot of lawyers don't even pay attention to, and that is you're not supposed to send a copy of the inspection report unless they ask for it.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah.
so when you are letting the seller know, hey, we're concerned with this, and this, you can't send them the report, because if you do, that's a breach of the contract. You sent them the report and
Right.
it says you're not supposed to. So that was a change, and we all had to adapt to that, because back before this version of the contract was in use, it was very standard that you would not only say, I'm worried about these things, here's the report, take a look at it,
Yeah, that was pretty
you
frightening.
know, and that also leaves the seller, when they get a copy of the report, that leaves the seller in a difficult position if the deal were to break down, because now do they have to disclose things that they weren't necessarily aware of before, but now the inspection has brought them to light.
Yes.
So that's on the other side of the deal, and that's another whole show.
So if you're a seller watching this, don't go out and get an inspection before you put it on the market. If you don't want to find out things about your house, let the buyer pay for it.
Right.
The buyer find out. Of course, there's a little more strategy to that. Happy to talk to you. If you're watching this and you want to talk more about that, I'm happy to have a little discussion about the pros and cons of getting an inspection before you even put your house on the market. Steve, one more thing. And if you feel like, Christine, this is for another show, then just stop me. But on the contract, there's also the as is and the waiving inspection. Do you want to talk about that, or do you feel like that's going to be another show, Christine?
Well, we had an earlier show where we talked a little bit about, the as is provision. The waiving of the inspection is a negotiating tool when the market is similar to the way it is now and you're trying to make your offer look better. If you waive the inspection, then obviously you have no right to come in and say, well, I'm going to cancel the contract because I found this, and this in the inspection. You've waived your right. You're not going to do it.
Also, if you don't mind me interjecting, with the waive inspection, doesn't the seller have the right to the buyer saying, I'm not going to let you in with an inspector?
Yeah.
They have the right
Yeah,
to
they waived it. So if the buyer wanted to have a thorough inspection done, it would have to be after closing. Truthfully, I understand the negotiating power that gives a buyer when they're trying to compete with others, but I try to recommend against them waiving the inspection, because
Yeah, if it's
they do
possible.
want to know, if it's possible.
Yeah.
And then you have a lot of buyers that believe that they can walk through a home themselves and that they have some sort of background or construction knowledge. Oh, my dad walked through it with me and he checked it out and said, I'm fine. And I'm like,
But the seller can
yeah,
still say, you're not walking through it with dad until later. Seller would have the
yeah,
right
but
to say that.
sometimes the buyers will be slippery about that. They're like, well, I
Well,
brought
have a
my
good
dad
agent.
because he wants to
Have a
see.
have a good agent.
Yeah,
Yep.
right,
It's all
right.
timing of when to allow that access again. When in the contract, at what points in
You
the
don't
contract.
have to, exactly.
Yeah, you don't have
And
to. Yeah, it's a risk of, oh, they're so excited they want to bring their mom and dad in, and then next thing you know, you hear they're opening and closing all the windows and going in with a ladder and climbing into the attic.
the proof of this presentation is that you need seasoned veterans to represent you, to be able to negotiate through all the ins and outs, and that's why you do such a great job.
Well, thank you, Steve. Yeah, there is I learned it from my mom, who's a realtor, long ago when I was first starting. She said, you got to understand all the meaning between the lines of the contract, what's hidden
Yeah.
in the contract, so that way there aren't any surprises. So I learned that quickly in this business. And so it's to protect my client, when they're under contract, if they're the seller, to make sure they're protected, they get to closing, instead of something that seems so innocent ends up botching the deal. Yeah, you and I have seen it enough times to know not to let it happen ever again, right?
And sadly, you can't rely on everybody in every deal to be reasonable.
Yeah, right,
And,
right. But yeah, as your
So
point is, seasoned agent, they're gonna know what to anticipate to avoid the possible problems. They don't even want it to happen. Steve, I appreciate your time. You're at a closing. I gotta let you go. What's the best way people can get in touch with you if they want to pick your brain a little more or get
I'm always available to talk with people, especially when they say, "Oh, I'm working with Christine," and I'm like, "Hey, what do you need?" But the best way to reach me is on my cell. It's area code 224-595-1216. Feel free, pretty much 24/7. If I'm doing something I can't answer, I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
I appreciate that they can call or text you at that number.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it. And if you don't want to get involved with an attorney right away, obviously I can hook you up with Steve later, but if you want to reach out to me, there's two ways. You can text this code, let's talk CT at 630-931-0045. You can also text me directly at 630-853-2370. There are so many ways to contact me. You can even go on all my social media, just DM me, and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel so you can watch more shows like this and keep learning about real estate and be a very educated buyer or seller before you even start that journey. Thank you. You have a great day. Steve, thank you for joining us. I appreciate it.
Take care, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.